In normal life, if a husband disappears, his wife calls the police. In Putin's Russia, she opens Telegram. She scrolls through photos of burned documents, scraps of uniforms, and body fragments, trying to understand whether the dead man brought from the front is hers. If a Zinc coffin arrives, she may ask for it to be opened, because she is terrified of burying a stranger. And then comes the part that is hardest for outsiders to understand. After all of this, after the silence, the searching, the morgue rumors, the paperwork, the coffin, she may still support Putin. Not just repeat the right words to protect herself and her children, but truly believe. Defend the war, defend the myth, even attack other women like herself when they start asking the wrong questions. The wives, mothers, and sisters still help preserve the story that destroyed their own families. So here's the real question. Why does the lie survive even after the coffin arrives? I'm Elvira Bary, a writer born in the USSR, and today I want to take you inside the world of Russian contract soldiers' wives, women who suffer the war intimately, pay one of its highest prices, and yet often remain among the people most determined to protect its meaning. Here's our roadmap. The second front, why the war does not end at the trench. Money and glory, how cash becomes heroism. The sealed myth, why facts cannot break belief. The missing man. What happens when a soldier disappears? The Zinc coffin test, why death often strengthens the lie. No women's revolt, why contract soldiers' wives rarely becomes anti-war after the war. Why this wound will poison Russia for decades. If you value this kind of deep dive into the hidden machinery of Russian society, subscribe, like, and share. You can also join my think tank, support through PayPal or Super Thanks, or tap hype points. And if you are listening on Spotify, follow the show there too. It really helps. The second front. We usually picture war as something men do. A man signs a contract, puts on a uniform, and goes to the trenches. But behind most of these men stands a woman, wife, mother, or sister. Sometimes all of them at once. These women do not hold the rifle, but they become part of the system that makes the rifle possible. This is what children's writer Masha Rupasova saw when she began studying Russian women's chats. At first, she was collecting school and kindergarten propaganda. She wanted to understand what Russian children were being told about the war. Then, in the summer of 2022, she found herself inside chats of women whose husbands were fighting in Ukraine. And she couldn't believe what she was reading. These were not some propaganda bots. These were real women with children, dogs, cats, or flowers on their profile pictures. Women with ordinary faces, homes, and lives. And inside those lives, something had shifted so deeply that arguments like war is bad no longer worked. These women live inside another reality. In that reality, Russia never attacks. Russia only defends itself. The whole world envies Russia and wants its resources. Putin does not sleep, does not eat, suffers terribly, but protects the country from enemies. If one explanation breaks, another appears immediately. NATO, biolabs, the Baltics, fascists, traditional values. The details change, but the myth survives. And then the man goes to war. Sometimes the family decides together. Sometimes the man signs along. But after he signs, the difference disappears as the entire family is rebuilt around the contract. The woman starts living by the rhythm of the front. Has he called? Did the unit move? Why is he offline? Is there a list of the wounded? This is why I called it the second front. These women are not soldiers, but the war feeds on them just as it feeds on their husbands and sons. And this second front matters because it helps the first one continue. When women defend the myth, more men can go. When women turn death into glory, the next death becomes easier to sell. Money and glory. In women's chats, the same phrases are repeated almost word for word. According to women, that's what their men said when enlisting. Who, if not me? Our guys are fighting there. I'm ashamed to sit at home. I won't hide. I'm a real man. The chats, regions, and families are different, but the lines are always the same. That is how propaganda works when it becomes part of everyday language. A man does not say, I'm poor, I have no future, and the state is offering me money to risk my life. He says, I'm going to defend the motherland. And maybe he partly believes it, but the money is always there. Since the full-scale invasion, Russia has relied heavily on contract recruitment. The state keeps raising payments because it needs bodies and wants to avoid another open mass mobilization. Putin doubled the federal signing bonus in 2024 to 400,000 rubles. Regional bonuses can go much higher. In 2026, several regions restored or raised large payments after cutting them in 2025. For a Moscow professional, these numbers may not sound magical. For a family in a small town, they can look like their only shot at a better life. Rupasova describes the typical woman from these chats as someone from a small town or village, often between 30 and 50, with children, modest education, and a family income that may be painfully low. She may work as a shop assistant, dishwasher, farm worker, or in some small informal job. There are exceptions, of course. Some are more educated, more fashionable, more internet savvy, but the core social world is poor, provincial, and trapped. Now, imagine what a military contract means there. It can solve most of the family's burdens at once. Pay a debt, fix a roof, buy a car, and send the child to a university. But there's a moral problem. If the man goes only for money, the whole thing looks ugly. Then the family has sold him. So the money needs a story, and that story is heroism. Suddenly, the man is not a poor Russian with few options. He is a defender, a warrior, a real man. The wife is not someone who accepted a dangerous bargain. She is the wife of a hero. The mother is not losing her son to a stupid war. She is giving him to the motherland. These two motives work together. Money makes the decision possible, and glory makes it bearable. The sealed myth. A coffin should break propaganda, but in this world, it often protects it. The stories these women in chats believe, the stories they tell each other, are often illogical, but at the same time, they are useful for protecting their identity and with it, their sanity. Because the moment these women see clearly, everything collapses at once. Then the man was not a defender, he was an invader. The money was not the state honoring a hero. It was payment for participation in a criminal war. The death was not sacrifice. It was waste. The family was not strong. It was complicit. That is too much reality for one person to hold. So the myth holds it for her. This is why direct argument fails. At the beginning of the war, Ropasova tried to explain simple things to former readers who came to argue with her online. She writes children's books, so she thought she could explain in clear words why war is bad. It didn't work. Later, inside the women's chats, she understood why. Her arguments were entering a world where they had no weight, where they threatened the whole structure of the self. A woman may hear from her own husband that commanders treat soldiers like meat. She may know that men are sent into terrible assaults. She may know that someone died from a stroke before reaching the line. She may hear that a soldier was killed by his own side. And still, the conclusion remains the same. He is a hero. The missing man. For many wives, the real war begins when the man disappears, when he stops answering calls. At first, she thinks, maybe his phone died. Maybe the unit moved. Maybe there's no signal. Maybe phones were taken away. Maybe he is on a mission. Maybe he will call tomorrow. Then tomorrow comes. Nothing. Another day. Nothing. When a man disappears like this, he is rarely declared dead immediately. Usually he becomes missing. That word is a special kind of torture. Missing means he could be dead in a field or wounded in a hospital, or captured, or lying unidentified in a morgue. The woman must live inside all those possibilities at once. So she starts searching. She writes to other wives, enters chats, and asks who has contact with the unit. She looks for the list of wounded. She searches Telegram channels with dead bodies and sends descriptions. Independent reporting shows the scale of this missing man world. By December 2025, Russian courts received almost 90,000 claims to declare missing servicemen dead or missing, with the number of cases accelerating sharply since mid-2024. The Rostov military morgue has become one of the main symbols of this system. Waiting to learn about a missing man's fate can last half a year, 8 months, 2 years, sometimes longer. There are men missing since 2022. The Zinc coffin test. In Russian, coffins for dead soldiers often arrived closed, sealed, zinc-lined. The family is told, "Here he is, your husband, son, or brother. Bury him." But after years of this war, many women no longer trust even that. There is a brutal word for what happens next. Расцинковка. Opening the zinc. Some families decide to open the coffin and look inside because they are afraid that the body inside is not theirs. Inside the women's chats, this became a major topic. Some discuss independent DNA testing. Some warn others not to bury a sealed coffin without checking, because there are cases confirmed inside those communities by the women themselves when families received the wrong dead man. Some who do not open it continue living with the fear. Maybe I buried someone else. And if I buried someone else, then another family will never get their son. This is one of the worst terrors of this war. And yet, even this often does not break belief. You may think that such a moment would cause moral collapse, that a mother would say, "Why did he go there? Why did they take him? Why did he die like this? Who did this to us?" Sometimes such questions appear, but usually something else happens. The family protects the meaning of the death. They still say he performed a heroic act. Because if he is not a hero, then what is he? A criminal? A fool deceived by propaganda? And what is the family then? No, that door must stay closed. No women's revolt. This is why the wives of contract soldiers are unlikely to become an anti-war movement. Their pain does not turn into politics. There is an important difference between the wives of mobilized men and the wives of contract soldiers. The wives of mobilized men have shown more protest potential. Their basic claim was, the state took our men and will not return them. That gave them a language of injustice. They could say, we were not asked, we were not warned, we want rotation, we want our husbands home. Even that protest was suppressed. But among contract soldiers' wives, the situation is different. The man signed. Maybe under pressure, or under propaganda, or because of poverty. But still, the contract creates a moral trap. The state can always say, he chose this. And the family often says the same, because the alternative is worse. The wives of contract soldiers are mostly too busy to react to public news. They hardly discuss politics, negotiations, or scandals. Earlier, some hoped talks with Ukraine might end the war. Now, even that discussion has faded. People sometimes imagine grief as a revolutionary force. A mother loses a son, so surely she will turn against the regime. And a wife receives a coffin, so surely she will ask who caused this. But grief does not automatically produce resistance. Sometimes it produces deeper loyalty because loyalty is the last bridge to the dead. If the war is wrong, then he died for nothing. This thought is unbearable. So the woman does not become anti-war. Instead, she becomes more determined to protect the meaning of her man's death. The chats help with this. When someone asks the obvious question, why do we need Kherson? Why do we need Sumy region? I want my son back. Others shut it down almost immediately. They say, no, he did not die for nothing. No, you cannot say that. They protect the lie because if one woman admits it's a lie, the others may have to admit it too. This is how a community prevents awakening. After the war. After the war, Russia will not only have veterans, it will have widows, mothers, and sisters whose identities were built around the war. If a man or several men from one family went to war, how does that family later say, we were wrong? How does a mother say, I gave my son to a lie? It is impossible, so many will hold on. They will say, our men were heroes. They went when others hid. They defended Russia. This is where the post-war poison begins, because not everyone in Russia accepted this war equally. Even in small towns, there are families who did not send men who refused and women who quietly understood. In these small towns and villages, society is already split. One part went to war, another did not. Both parts reject one another, and the part poisoned by war will hold on to its poison because it has become the core of their identity. That's how post-war Russia will have not simply grief, but competing moral realities living on the same street. One family says, our son was a hero. Another thinks, your son killed Ukrainians for money. One widow says, I sacrificed. Another woman thinks, you sent him. And then there are the men who return. Some will return traumatized, addicted, and violent. Some convinced that the country owes them everything. Some already learned that force works and that cruelty can be rewarded. Their families will defend them. The state will praise them. This is how war keeps living after the shooting slows down, as domestic violence and criminal networks widow benefits, children raised on stories of heroic fathers, and resentment toward those who did not go. Russia will someday have to face this world. But facing it will mean telling millions of people that their suffering does not automatically make them right. That will be one of the hardest truths of the post-war future. Before you go, I want to ask you something difficult. Have you ever seen a family protect a painful lie because the truth would make their sacrifice feel meaningless? Maybe it was about a war. Maybe about a bad marriage, a failed leader, a family secret, a decision no one wanted to admit was wrong. If this video helped you understand Russia more deeply, please like the video and subscribe. Share it with one person who still thinks propaganda ends when reality arrives. And if you want to support this work directly, you can join my think tank or use PayPal or Super Thanks. You can also tap high points to help this episode travel further. And if you are listening on Spotify, follow the show so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you for watching. See you next time.